Rob, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hey, John, thank you so much for having me. My name is Rob Stauffer. I'm the founder of Ready Group Go. I am about 17 years into teaching, and I currently live in San Jose, Costa Rica. I teach at an international school called Lincoln School, and have about 6 years teaching public school in Washington State, where I'm originally from. And I think that's the beginning of it.
That's perfect. Perfect. And we're just off camera. We're talking about a post that I recently posted, right? And the post was I was in my car, and it was funny because I have this daily practice where I have about 10, 15 minutes in my car before I actually drive to work. And so for
Yeah.
about 10 or 15 minutes, I bring out my camera and I try to record something. And sometimes it's good and I'll post it, and other times it's just practice. And
Hmm.
today, I was thinking about things and, the state of the world and how things are going right now. And, I was thinking about how the students that need the most help are the students that need the most support. And the way that
Yeah.
they show that they need support is through their behavior. It's through their behavior. And sometimes it's difficult behavior. And in order for, us to meet their needs, it's not that we suspend them or send them home or isolate them or keep them on the bench or, put them in another room, any of that stuff. It's they need support, and let's provide
Yeah.
that support to them. That was the goal behind the post.
Yeah. And I think when I heard that, I think the biggest thing that really connected to me is we are all seeking the need for human connection and to feel like we belong and to feel like a part of something. And the ones who are most hurting or the ones that feel disconnected the most, as you were saying, they communicate it in their own ways. And I was just telling you before we jumped on here, my son is 7 years old. He just started first grade this year. He's nonverbal autistic, and watching him start to really want to connect with people, and the way that he does that doesn't always look the way that we want it to in a classroom, right? We want them to be seated, and we want them to keep their hands to themselves, and we want them to turn and listen to us when we need that. And in those moments, he's learning right now to connect with people, and it's a steep learning curve. And it's hard as a parent, but it's also teaching me a lot as an educator, because I really don't think it's just him who struggles. In fact, in his meeting with the principal today, as he was getting sent home because he was biting a teacher, we were totally on board with the principal. They have a great team, awesome support. But I even admitted, I was like, there's times where I, as a 45-year-old man, try to communicate or connect in a particular way, and I fail miserably. And it does not negate the truth behind my feelings. And how do we
Yeah.
balance both of those things? I want to validate where you're coming from. I want to understand you. I also need to set boundaries. And how do we play with that in the classroom as well?
What was the answer to that? How was that dealt with?
And I even just shared, like, as a professional, I'll send an email off that can be viewed as, snarky or unprofessional. And I can be the first one to jump in and say, you know what, I crossed the line on that. Absolutely. But at the same time, does it completely invalidate my frustration and my feeling behind that email? And what we talked about with the administrator, who was totally on board with this, was, how do we set those boundaries and say, hey, this isn't okay. We can't put our hands on teachers or bite
Mhm.
teachers when we're upset, but also to voice that frustration to them. With my son, I'll say, you want to watch the iPad, but we have to eat dinner now. And, like, you're frustrated because you want, like, for him to have that voice, to hear his feelings spoken back to him, and the look in his eyes is, wow, somebody hears me, somebody sees me, somebody gets it. And I think that's something we can do with everybody, including ourselves.
I like that technique. You want this, but we have to do that. You
Hmm.
want this, but you have to do that. That's what you just said right now. Where did you get that from? Where did you just Did you pick that? How did you come up with that?
I got scars on my arms from a lot of pinching and a lot of biting these last few years. And to look in his eyes of, looking at me saying, you can tell he wants something so badly.
Hmm.
And to just speak it back to him, to me, was just, it was a way of me processing it myself. And I'm learning
Hmm.
that as a teacher too. I start to lose my patience. I really struggle with that. I have a short fuse in many situations, and I've learned over the years, the more vocal I can be about the process. Hey, I'm feeling frustrated. Or, hey, I can sense you guys are really tired at the end of the class. To speak it and to identify it, not only for them, but for me to hear it. Kind of like we sit in traffic. You can either speak poorly if somebody cut you off, or you can speak out loud, maybe their perspective, and what does that do for us in that moment,
Hmm.
but maybe also for the classroom to hear that he gets it, he sees us, he understands it.
That's a good point. I'm an assistant principal for special education, and I've done it for the last 5 years. And I've worked in alternative classrooms where there are nonverbal students with autism, and I worked in core classrooms as well where they're verbal. And so, what you're saying right now about like the whole frustration of them wanting to communicate, a student wanting to communicate when they're nonverbal,
Mm.
and then the teacher's not understanding what's going on. I don't know what's going on, and they get extremely frustrated. And the action, the behavior might be the biting, it might be the scratching, it might be the yelling, it might
Mm.
be the moving around the classroom. um, and it is it's like this puzzle. It's this puzzle where you try to figure out what exactly the student needs.
Hmm.
How do we provide that to the student? um, and it's just a puzzle. And the people that I've worked with, the teachers, the special ed teachers I worked with, have been amazing. They've
Mm.
been great. The paraprofessionals have been amazing, loving, caring. I learned from them. I'm like, man, you guys are like, you're like angels, because
Yeah.
this in a normal situation, you have somebody that's never seen that before. You're a gen ed teacher, and you've
Yeah.
never seen that before, and you're put in that situation. It's very confusing. And as a gen ed teacher, I don't know. It's like, how do you handle a situation like that? I don't have a sped background. I've taught 18 years gen ed,
Mm.
and then I got this position, and all of this was new to me. All of this was all of special education has been new to me for the
Yeah.
last 5 years, and I've been learning so much. One thing that I've seen, like I've been in situations where a student would just tear up the whole classroom, like the whole classroom, just tear up the whole classroom, hit, punch, bite, and just knock over chairs,
Yeah.
and you want them to de-escalate, and you're just kind of waiting for them to de-escalate. And then it comes time where they start to do something that you want them to do, right?
Yeah.
Like let's say they have good quiet hands, they stop throwing stuff, and you just bring it up like, I like quiet hands, I like your quiet hands. And you just point out the good things that you've noticed, and maybe they sat down on a chair. Oh, good sitting, good sitting, I like your sitting, good sitting. Maybe they put a book back, or whatever it is, they start to clean up. Good cleaning, good cleaning. And
Yeah.
you just point out the things that you like, that they're doing well, that you want them to do.
Mm.
And for me, and then you can see that they know what's going on. They see that you're acknowledging their good behavior, and they start to continue with that good behavior. Now that takes patience, because if you just got bit, pinched, punched, your whole room is destroyed. You got a book thrown at you. It lasted for 15 minutes. You're on that fight or flight, that feeling of fight or flight.
Yeah.
Like, man, all these things happen, and you have a whole class to deal with, and maybe they evacuated. And then you have to center yourself, and then you have to point out all the good. Good job. I like that. I like what you
Yeah.
just did right there. And that takes, oh man, that is not easy to do, but it is necessary. Like, there needs to be some sort of training like that, where like like, okay, this all this happened, and now you have to point out the good. Now you
Yeah,
have to
and
point out the good.
what I
That's
hear what I hear you saying too a lot is you're removing yourself from the situation, and that idea of you making it into a puzzle. Like, how do I learn about this person and what they're going through? Because I think my greatest challenges over the years, and as an educator and personally, is just taking everything personally. I read the Ryan Holiday book Ego is the Enemy, and it really shaped my teaching, because it was like, this isn't about you. Like, the
yes.
students come in after a long day and they're putting their heads on the desk, and they're like, just don't want anything to do with it. And it's like, this has nothing to do with me. And that idea of solving that puzzle of like, how do we put this together ourselves? Because literally, if I make this about my struggle and what I'm going through, and I'm saying that as somebody who still learns it on a daily basis, I know as soon as I start to lose it or lose that patience, it's because I'm making it more about me than really about them.
And yes, and that's such a hard piece, especially if you're a young educator. I mean, we're in our 40s, mid 40s over here.
Hmm.
Um, if you're a young educator, if you're 22, 23, 24 years old, and you're so used to it being about you,
Yeah.
yeah, and you know, you don't have, maybe you don't have kids yourself. Maybe you're just
Mm.
23 years old living by yourself, you know, and 24 years old, young teacher. It's hard to not make it about you. It's hard to not take it personal. It's hard to not, it is. It's hard to, I remember when I was a young teacher, 22, 23 years old. I started when I was teaching when I was 22 years old. I would take things personal. I would take
Sure.
things. I would take, like, if that was attack against me, would that would, you're making my day uncomfortable. You know, you
Yeah.
just ruined my day. It's about how I feel. It's about my feelings, and not about your feelings. Not about, you might have been going through way more than what I've been going through. I just spilt my coffee today, and I'm upset. I'm a 23-year-old man. I'm upset 'cause I spilled my coffee. You might have not eaten breakfast this morning. You might have been living with
Right.
a caregiver. You might have,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
not had dinner last night. You might have gotten spanked for no reason, you know, out of
Hmm.
frustration. And you're walking in my classroom. I had something simple, like I just spilled my coffee and all my day's ruined. And you
Yeah.
went through all this other stuff, and I'm making it about me. You know, and so
Yeah.
that's hard, you know, but
No, the
it's
other
necessary.
day, I had a student just the other day who was clearly really upset about something, and I wasn't I wasn't ready for that kind of energy, and I kind of snapped back with some sarcasm, and then realized way too late that like that was not the right thing to do. And she just like lost it and started walking away, and my that old voice of mine, I found myself saying out loud, "Hey, look at me." And she turned and just walked out the door. And I really, like, my old self would have literally gotten up out of my chair and like chased her, like, no, this is about me and like my
Mhm.
victory today. And one thing I've really, in those moments, to be able to let that go and to go home and not be wearing that as I walk through the door of my house, and to spend the time with my son, and or to just sit and enjoy a book and just relax for the evening. And you know what? The next day she came in and she apologized, and I apologized to her, and she's like, it wasn't about this, it was about this. And I'm like, you know what? I like I didn't even think about it throughout the night. And I wished I could shake my old self and be like, you are going to spend years carrying this stuff with you, and like, it's not about you at
Yeah,
all. And
yeah.
yeah.
I had a student where he tore up the classroom. He just tore it all up, and it was, we just, he tore it up. His somebody came to pick him up. Somebody came to pick him up, and they came inside the classroom, and that person was like, you need to say sorry to the teacher. You gotta say sorry to the teacher. You gotta say sorry to all the people in here, telling the kid. And the kid's like, no, no, no. And I called him over. I was like, come here for a second. And this is after a mess, just a mess. I was like, come
Yeah.
here for a second. I said, I'm going to say sorry first. I'm going to say sorry first because maybe I offended you, or maybe I said something to trigger you, right? I said, they called me in here because of you were doing X, Y, and Z. So when I came in here, I was here to keep safety. I was here to keep safety. That's why I was called into this classroom. But maybe I didn't do it right. So I'm
Mm.
gonna start off by saying, I'm sorry if I didn't handle the situation correctly to you. And
Mm.
then he looks at me and he's all teary eyed. And I was like, you know what? And there's people in here that love you. I go, your teacher loves you, so and so loves you. There are people here in this school that love you, and I want you to know that, right?
Mm.
And so we want to. I was like, so I'm sorry. And then that dropped his whole guard, and he
Right?
was like, I'm sorry for doing this. I hurt you, and I did this to you, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have said sorry if I didn't start first. Like I had to
Yeah.
initiate it. I had to say, you know what? Maybe I offended you. Maybe I did things that were wrong, but I just got to tell you that I had to keep safety, and that's why I was here. And so, and again, being an educator, right? Being an educator, you got to put other people's needs first.
Yeah.
You got to put like yourself on the back burner, right? If you're way back then, you're putting everybody else, your students' needs first, right? Like in that situation, I could have still been offended. I could have
Yeah.
still been like, "No, you need to tell me sorry. I'm the teacher.
Right.
I'm the assistant principal. You need to tell me sorry for
Right.
all. Look at I'm gonna have to clean this all up, and this. I could, that's the natural. Your natural instinct is that. That's what you
Yeah.
naturally, you're offended. But being in this field for this many years, it's like, man, it's not really about that. It's like let's create these environments where students could feel seen and
Yeah.
heard and loved and cared for and looked after. And and if you do that, that's where you create like this legacy of like if you're at a school and that's all you did and you were a
Yeah.
teacher there, man, that you would have there'd be stories about you for years. Like I remember so and so, he was such a good teacher. He changed my life. She changed my life. She did this when I didn't even deserve it. She
Yeah.
forgave me when I didn't even deserve it. I did all these things. I cursed her out. I cursed him out, but she still forgave me and she gave me another chance the next day. And I'll never forget that educator. And maybe when I grow up, I'll do the same too. That's what we're trying to do as as educators, is that kind of stuff. It's that legacy stuff.
Well, what I heard you say too, as you were like talking to that student, is you were being vulnerable. You were
Yes.
modeling vulnerability, and I remember it was like I think a lot of people pick this up from Brene Brown with the Daring Greatly book, but there's that understanding of like vulnerability is strength, and to start by admitting wrong, to start by saying maybe I didn't pull this off as well as or maybe I meant it this way, but it didn't come across the way that I meant it, or
Hmm.
maybe I failed you in this situation, and I want to apologize. And I don't think that's just a teacher versus student thing. I think like when we're in an argument with our, whether it's our spouses or partners or kids or anyone, I think dropping that guard and saying this isn't a power struggle because I'm not here to make it one, and it doesn't have to be this. A lot of times I find myself saying that to students when I pull them out of class. Hey, this isn't a teacher to student conversation. This is a person to person
Yeah.
conversation. That hurt. That really
Hmm.
hurt. And it's not you're wrong and I'm right. It's I was hurt, and that admission, that vulnerability, I think kind of strips a lot more down than we're aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. That same day when that situation happened, I'm outside doing lunch duty, and the rest of the kids that saw some of the things that happened,
Mhm.
I was just walking by and just being a human being, like asking questions. Funny, like, how's the burgers today? Thumbs up, thumbs down. What do you guys think? Thumbs up, thumbs down. How's the pizza? What do you guys think? Out of 10. I'm just talking to everybody. I'm just walking around making these connections, and they're like, Mr. Vergara, are you okay? They're like, are you okay? I was like, no, I'm fine. He's like, yeah, but you got cursed at and you someday through. So I was like, I'm fine. I go, I'm okay. Are you? I was like, are you okay? They're like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm okay. They're like, what happened to your eye? Because I busted a blood vessel right here. They're like, what happened? I was like, you know what? I was like, that person didn't do that. I go, I woke up and I had a bad eye already. I'm good. I'm good. But they were really you know, worried. You know, we're
Mm.
really worried about me, and we're really worried about like, man, is things okay? And then again, my goal is to be like just to make the kids feel comfortable. Like, no, we're okay. Things are taken care of.
Yeah.
Eat your lunch. This, you know, we're gonna play some kickball. We're gonna whatever. Eat the pizza. Let's talk a little bit from 1 to 10. What is it like? And just being a human and making those connections, and being honest with your responses. And I think
Yeah,
that goes a long way.
for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Um, how did you get into the field of education to begin with?
Yeah, it's a funny story. I was the student throwing books.
Yeah,
I was a behavior mess all through school. I was definitely suspended at some point in high school. Um, no, it was a funny kind of transition into education. I think at one point I tell this story. It's just kind of silly, but at the time I was like really involved in my church, and I had a huge crush on this girl who was in charge of teaching Sunday school. And I thought, if I can go in and help out with the Sunday school, she's going to fall in love with me. And I went in and they said, you're a kind of a big, loud guy, you can play music. Can you be in charge of the fifth grade boys? They were the oldest boys of the whole thing.
yeah,
And they were like, here's just a couple things to ask them. And if you can just kind of keep them and basically don't let them just disrupt everyone else, and they clearly don't want to be here. And I loved it. I remember just even that 15 minutes of just having their attention and connecting with them and being that
yeah.
person they look to. And at the time, if you would have said, do you want to be a classroom teacher, I would have been like, that's literally the worst thing I could ever imagine. I was a terrible student. And uh, and then I just something clicked one day, and I said, like, this is literally, if I can connect with people, and if I can be creative and collaborate with people and like learn from one another, for me that was everything. And from that point I taught. I was a YMCA summer camp counselor and director for about 7 years through all of my university, and then from that directly into middle school. And it was just, I've never looked back since that kind of turning point a good couple months after high school.
How was middle? Everybody's afraid of middle school. How was middle school?
I loved it. I taught it for most of my so I guess I forgot to mention what I teach now. So about up until COVID, I was teaching in Costa Rica, moved to Colombia, Medellin, Colombia for 2 years. And all up until then, I was always a sixth or seventh grade language arts or social studies teacher and loved it. I always said seventh grade was my kind of golden spot. And I came back during COVID to Costa Rica without a job, got picked up at my old school, and they said, hey, we're losing a bunch of teachers in the high school. Would you mind teaching ninth grade uh, English literature? And I said, I never, ever thought about teaching high school ever. And they were like, no, they're just like big eighth graders. They're just like big, dumb eighth graders. Just come in and
Mhm.
like, it's fine. And sure enough, like, they've crept in. Like, now I'm doing, oh, so now I teach entrepreneurship. So I was teaching English for about 3 years. I picked up a full-time entrepreneurship position. Now I teach design. And I'm just obsessed with that. But, it's like every year that it gets older, I appreciate it like another level of it. And so even though I'm sure someday I'll be back in a seventh grade classroom, I've actually really been loving high school. It's been a lot of fun.
So how did you get involved in working like in Costa Rica, and how did that happen?
That was like, I just had some friend. I grew up in Bellingham, Washington. That's my hometown, and I went to community college there and university, and I got my dream position at the school that I had been student teaching, Fairhaven Middle School in Bellingham. Shout out to Fairhaven. And I had a view of Bellingham Bay. You could see killer whales breaching
Wow.
from my classroom. That was the spot. And people said, if you get that place, you're never leaving. This is it. Like, and I had this kind of fear. Like, I had friends who had moved to Korea and taught English there and had lived in other parts of the world. And I thought, is this it? And I did a trip to Colombia and met a really cool teacher there who was teaching internationally. She was a Canadian, and she said, "Yeah, I was in Cartagena." She was like, "This is my weekend. Like, I live in coffee country. I come here for the weekends just to hang out at a pool and visit friends and stuff." And I said, "That's it." I got home, signed up for a teaching fair, and a couple months later got hired from this. I had never been to Costa Rica. I had never been to Central America. I literally had to Google, like, where is exactly Costa
Wow.
Rica. And
Wow.
yeah, and I thought, you know what, 2 years, that's it. It's a 2 year contract. I'll go somewhere else after that. Who knows? And then it turned into three, and then I had a son, and he's Costa Rican, and so now this is kind of my home.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
for a bit.
how was your Spanish going to Colombia and then Costa Rica?
I speak it. I
Just going there initially, you probably speak a lot better now. You've been there for a good amount of
yeah.
time, but like initially, how was your Spanish?
Oh, like Duolingo, like just
Yeah.
beginning. I think Duolingo was just coming out 10 years ago when I was about to move, and I was literally just picking up words here and there, and it's definitely helped. Now having my ex-in-laws and family and friends who only speak Spanish with me has been a really big thing. But another thing is just, it humbles you. It's another thing to be thrown into a new country where you have to really learn that maybe you don't always have all the right answers, and that maybe there's different ways of doing things, and that's not necessarily better or worse, that it's just different, and you have to learn to adapt to that, and again, not take it personally. So it's been a huge growth, opportunity for growth.
That's awesome. And you just fell in love with it? You just fell in love with Costa Rica and Colombia and
I feel just so I there's this warmth here. I remember, what's funny, John, it was like, I think it was a year into Costa Rica. I thought, someday I'll live in Spain, or I always kind of thought there was kind of this next level. And I went and visited Spain, and just, it felt so cold. And maybe it was just the dead of winter, but like, there was that lack of warmth of like people just looking at you and their eyes lighting up and just being very warm. And Costa Rica is very much that. Colombia is that as well. But I just felt accepted, and family is so important, and just these really tight communities, and it's something I've learned to really fall in love with here. So,
yeah.
and to see my son getting to like live with his grandparents and like part of the week, and have that warmth to grow up in, I think is really special.
That's awesome. Can you take me back to the your first year in Colombia? You're teaching in Colombia. You don't really speak the language. The only language you got is the dual language stuff. And it's the first day of school. Like, what are your nerves like? Like, how do you feel? Like, how do you connect with everybody? Like, how did that go?
I was still a total egomaniac. Like, I made a lot of mistakes kind of stepping in, and I made the mistake of stepping in and thinking, they're going to have to figure out how to adapt to my way of doing things. And I spent that whole year just trudging up a muddy hill, and just battered and bruised by the end of it. And it really took quite a few years to realize, like, hey, like, you got to change, and you have to adapt. And also, another thing that I love to tell people is, this goes back to the idea of different. It's different, not better or worse. Is my students were always late. They were always late to class, and it was really getting to me, because again, it was always about me, and like, how dare they be late to my class. But
Mhm.
what I noticed is, when they would go to leave, students, the bell would ring and they would turn and want to just start talking and connecting with one another. And I was like, all right, guys, like, get out of here. Where in the States, to have a line at the door, crowding to fall out the door so they could just leave and nobody's talking to each other. And here
Yeah.
they were just wanting to connect. And I finally had to tell them, it's like, this is incredible. Like, I'm learning that maybe on one end you're late, but why are you late? It's because you value that connection. You value, checking in with one another. They would walk up to me and say, how are you doing? How are things? And I'd be like, get to class, like, get
Mhm.
out of here. But it really was important, that connection. And I've learned to really value. I don't appreciate when people are late, but I still value kind of the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you teach entrepreneurship. What is that like? What exactly are you teaching?
Yeah, so it's really working through the design cycle. It's really a lot of brainstorming and thinking of problem solving and thinking of just. I took a really cool course at Stanford online called Creative and Design Thinking. So
Mhm.
I would recommend it to anybody. It's a fantastic course, but it's just about solving problems through understanding people. And I think that human element, to me, when I was teaching English, we were always trying to get to the heart of, like, what is the human experience? And for entrepreneurship, we learn about empathy interviews and how do you sit and just listen to somebody as opposed to just share your idea. So if I have this idea for an app, instead of telling you my idea, I sit down and I ask you questions about your experiences and just getting to know them better. And I love that idea of flipping the script on entrepreneurship, that it's less about you and more about your understanding of the world.
That's pretty good. And like when I heard you were saying like stuff like I hear you saying like, and it reminds me of of course I talk about cognitive coaching, stuff
No,
like
yeah,
that. Yeah, and it sounds like you implementing that into the entrepreneurship piece where they have
yeah.
to
I
listen
like to
and
get rid of that stereotype of, like, a tech bro in a Patagonia vest, who's got all the answers, who stands up and gives a keynote at their quarter meeting. And for me, it's the opposite. It's somebody who's sitting there in the back of the room taking notes, listening, asking questions, saying things like, that must have been really hard when,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And the better that we understand and tap into that human experience, I think the more grounded we are to what people really need. And the same thing in our classroom as well. Just what do our students need, and just listening, which
Yeah.
I still need to work on. Right, like, I'm still learning.
Yeah,
I'm
we
definitely
all
not
are.
the guru of listening.
We all are. We are all learning, and I think that that's important to point out that we do not all have the answers. Not one of us has all the answers, and we all have our flaws, and we all have our good things about ourselves. And this is the beauty of a school. Whereas in like if there is just one way to do things, if there's just one, like if the only tool that you have is a hammer, then everything's gonna look like a nail, right? And so but if you're in a school where there's multiple tools, right? You got a hammer, a screwdriver, you got like whatever, you got a multiple tools, then when a
Right.
situation happens, there's a lot of ways to look at that problem, right?
Hmm.
And so I think that that's important, that at a school you have multiple tools. Like the principal is not the end of like what I say goes and this is how we're gonna do. No, the principal's job in my mind is to make sure that the right tool is implemented. Like,
Right.
okay, I might not be good with instruction, but this person, my coach right here, I might not be good with dealing with the special ed department, but this person right here is great with dealing with this. We're
Hmm.
gonna send this person, and so I think that there is not. We don't all have the answers.
Yeah.
We're just a collective piece, a group of people who are just trying to make the best in a situation with, and help as many students as possible. But we all
Absolutely.
make mistakes. Yeah, we all make mistakes. Um, but let's talk about your ready group go. That
Yeah,
sounds like a entrepreneurship thing you got going on right there.
love it. Yeah, I started it way before I was teaching entrepreneurship, so it's funny that those things kind of met. But yeah, I would say about it was when I was living in Medellin, Colombia. I guess it goes further back. So just to kind of give a little overview, Ready Group Go is a smart grouping generator that allows teachers to group quickly like a random grouping generator, but using attributes. So in this case, do you want to group students based off of their behavior? Do you want to group them based off of their social groups or skills? So do you want to make reading groups with uniform groups so they are homogeneous, or do you want to break them up so they can have different discussions? So it's really just considering the students and what makes them unique and creating groups that would usually take you a good half hour of moving people around, but now it's doing the thinking for you. You're able to then manually move students around to make it work best. And then you can share that in a link. So I can usually post those groups on Teams or send it to another teacher or print it out and give it to my substitute. So weekly, my students are usually every week they sit in a new area with new people and have new people to connect with.
And why is that important? Why is it important for them to connect with new people?
I always think of the opposite, which is a very common one, especially once we get into high school. I've done a lot of surveys with elementary and middle school, and mostly elementary. They really understand why it's so important to get kids moving around and learning from one another. I think high school, you can walk 4 out of the 5 classes you walk past, and it's just come in, find your seat, sit wherever you want. And what we typically have there is students who will sit with the same 2 or 3 people throughout the entire semester. And we've all done this where we then ask them to get up and sit with somebody else, and it's like pulling teeth. And so there's this understanding of when I speak at a conference, the first thing that I always start with is I show them an image of a bus inside of a big yellow bus, and I show them a high school cafeteria filled with kids. And I say, technically, there's no rules on where you sit. But what are the rules? What are the unspoken rules? And they immediately start talking about social hierarchies. They immediately start talking about where the bad kids sit or where the cool kids sit, or you can't sit here. They bring up Mean Girls. They bring up Forrest Gump,
Hmm.
walking down the aisle, being told he can't sit there, he can't
Hmm.
sit there. And I said, so when we give those free spaces, what we're really creating is social rigidity. And the scariest part about that social rigidity is that students like my son, who are on the margins, who are nonverbal, who come from difficult backgrounds, who are low economic, who are part of different communities, are always the first students who are pushed out of that.
Yep.
So, who loves those spaces? The students with the highest social power, and they love to be at that peak. So, what I love to explain is when I shuffle my students every single week, I compare it to taking an ant jar and shaking it. It completely disrupts the entire hierarchy. They look around, they don't know who to look to, who's the person, who sits with where, we don't know, and they look to me. And what do I do as a teacher? I create those safe spaces. I create those spaces for collaboration, and I encourage them to learn from one another.
That's good. That's good. I totally agree with that. I'm not a believer in you stay in one seat the whole entire year because like they'll get trenched into one space. And the longer you let them stay in one space, the more difficult it is to get them out of that one space. It
And
just yeah.
and on top of that, my big thing, I've talked to many different students about this, and they'll even say, I would like to move, but that's an unsafe thing to do because they're leaving a particular group who will now say, what, you're too good for us, you're walking away, you're not going to sit with us. But there's also a chance they're going to sit with another group and be rejected. So what do? It's all about safety in those situations. For good or for bad, they're going to stay with that particular group. And what I can always tell when I walk by a class, I can always tell who mixed up their students and who let them sit where they want, because the boys are always on one side, the girls are always on the other, and they do not talk with each other. So for my new media course that we did yesterday, we're learning about interviewing, and I mixed them up by gender, which I typically try not to do. But this particular one, it was half the class was boys, half was girls. They were all close friends in those groups. And I mixed them up, and it was a perfect mix of every boy was grouped with a girl. And they had to sit with this person and do a 5-minute interview each, where they interview the person. And I was just blown away by their ability to just sit and connect and laugh and have a really good time. And I really think that they enjoyed it. I really
Yeah.
think that they were having a great time. And if you would have told them at the beginning, okay, everyone group up, they're not going to walk across the room and find a girl and say, "Hey, I don't know if you're currently grouped with somebody, but would you like to interview me for 5 minutes?" They're not going to do it.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
So we create those spaces, we break them up. I'm using rabbit ears here, but we're saying, uh, that it's random, when really I purposely wanted girls to be grouping with boys in that situation. And I think they had a great time.
Yeah, it creates those, it allows for community. It allows for
Mm,
community because if you don't get them talking to one another, then they don't know each other. And then when you don't know somebody, it's easy to be mean to them because you don't know them. But if I know everybody in the classroom, I can't be mean to somebody who just told me that, whatever, their parents are divorcing, or somebody just told me that their brother's sick. Or it's hard, but it is easy to be mean to somebody who sits across the room, who I've never spoken to, who I don't even know. You
yeah.
know, it's that being familiar with people in the classroom creates community, and then you're just there to make each other better and protect each other and make sure that everybody just is successful. And so that
I
random generator thing, that's a definitely necessary in every classroom.
and it's social learning. I always start my presentation. This next week, I'm speaking at the Tri Conference in Costa Rica. It's a Latin American International School Conference, and the very first thing I always show is a video that I didn't mean to get this video. I was videoing my son trying to drink out of a water fountain, and he was struggling for weeks. He couldn't figure it out. His forehead was in it, and then he was like trying to do this, and it was just a big mess. And I was videoing it to send to his mom, and this other little boy comes along and stands in front of him and drinks out of the water fountain in front of him. And you watch my son, who, as a child, as a parent of an autistic child, and there may be people listening that can relate to this, is it's you don't get to see them mirror, to look very often to others. They're, what we say, in their own world. And I watched him in this video look to that child who's drinking out of the water fountain, and then he immediately drinks out of the water fountain. And
Wow.
what I always ask, what did we see there? And they explain, and I'll say, today isn't about seating charts. It's not about grouping generators. This is about replicating that in the classroom and getting out of the way. That's what this is about. It's creating belonging. It's giving someone a space to learn at their level.
Yeah.
Because again, as egomaniacs, we can say we're the sage on the stage and we've got all the answers, and we know how to connect with these kids. But at the end of the day, they're going to learn the most from each other every single time.
That's good. And how much pushback do you get from the students?
Everyone asks that, and day one they come in, and I immediately show them where to say it. Day one, and even if you don't know your students, I always encourage people to at least randomize moving people around, because at least it kind of breaks it up. and there is a very different power dynamic when they walk in and you immediately show them where to sit. That's a very different thing than all the cool boys sit in the back, pile on top of each other. All the mean girls are in this area. These two quiet kids who never talk to each other, they're just there because they have nowhere to sit,
Yeah.
right? That's the power. That's the challenging power dynamic that we have to deal with if we don't. So it pops up a little bit, but one thing a lot of teachers in my building have started using Ready Group Go, and they all come back and say, "I'm amazed by how little they complain."
Hmm. Yeah.
Because, and the big thing that I push with them is what they're used to if they are assigned a place is, as teachers, it takes us forever to make another seating chart, so we don't. And what happens? 5 weeks go by and they're sitting in the exact same spot. But if they know that they only have to sit in a place for 1 week, and I have a rotating schedule, so that's 2 or 3 days for a week, and then that's it. The next week, they're in a different part of the room with a different group, having different conversations. And for many of them, that feels a lot more safe than, shoot, where do I need to sit today, or who do I need to be next to, or any of that.
Yeah, I think secretly they want to connect with as many people as they possibly can, and you're just giving them the opportunity to connect with as many people as they possibly can.
Oh, and John, I always tell the story. I was my ninth grade year, and the ninth grade boys showed up to the dance after the football game. And of course, none of the older boys were there because they were all still out at the game or they were playing. And all the cheerleaders came running in, and they looked at us. We were the only boys there, and they said, "You come dance with us." And I tell people that was the night we became men, because but that would have never, we would have never approached them, right?
Yeah.
It was that the circumstance just happened to align, and they were totally cool with just hanging out with these dorky ninth graders and teaching them to dance. And I really think that happens. Obviously, we need to create that positive environment, right? We
Yeah.
model bringing other people into the conversations, and we model so much, but at the same time we allow those circumstances to happen where students connect and they turn to one another and they ask each other how their weekend was. And after meeting with them 5 different times in a semester, it's just, yeah, sure, I'll sit with you, like, we're cool. Don't worry.
And what kind of pushback do you get from teachers? Like, where do they you ever get pushback from teachers saying, "Nah, we're not going to use it," or "This is not a good idea," or what do you
you
get?
know
Do you,
it, Yeah, I think the most, okay, so I, for the upcoming conference that I'm going to be speaking at, it's hosted at our school. And my principal said, "I don't want you guys filling the rooms of all of the teachers that are speaking from this school. I want you to go out and listen to the other presentations." So we're going to give the presentations from these teachers beforehand. So I trained my entire high school staff on Ready Group Go. But I never start by talking about the grouping generator. I start by talking about my son. I talk
Mhm.
about the cafeteria and the bus. And it was at that moment where most teachers said they fully drank the Kool-Aid. And it was because they said, "I thought this was just about one more tech tool, one more thing that we have to use in the class. And now you reframed it as belonging. You
Mhm.
reframed it as creating that community and making it easier for us." And that was a big kind of aha moment for me is, hey, again, this isn't about seating charts. This isn't about some extra tech tool. This is about, what do you want for your classroom? What do you want them learning? How do you want them learning? And I think once I frame it like that, they get to choose. Nobody's making them use the grouping generator. But I think once they realize, hey, letting them just come in and sit wherever they want is can be actually a detriment to them, and it can make your job a whole lot harder.
Yeah. Yeah, I was on your page, like I said, today, and I was like, man, he dedicated a page to grouping. he, he dedicated his page to grouping students. I was going through video after video after video. I was like, wow, there's a lot of videos about grouping students, and
Yeah.
I was like, okay, okay. And then the way that you framed it, like you said, you've won me over about the school bus and the hierarchy, and your son and the water fountain, and it's about creating belonging. You know, yeah, yes, yes, and having a generator to help with solving that problem
Well,
is a good idea.
and that's funny that you say that because with the social media, I found myself saying, if I did make social media for a grouping generator, how many videos can I make where I talk about all the features, where I bring up, and is that really what this is about? And so I purposely, the very first post on the Ready Group Go Instagram is the video of my son drinking out of the fountain,
Ooh, I gotta find that
because
one.
it's the oldest one. Last year I made a challenge to make 3 posts a year, so it's going to be a little
Three
ways down
posts, three
there.
posts a year.
Oh, sorry, 3 posts a week.
Oh, I was like 3 posts a year.
No. But for me, that was a challenge because I'm not a natural. I love your idea of jumping on for just to practice
Just
talking
to
it through in the
practice.
car. For me, it was a huge challenge. But I started off with that video because I really need to remind myself and others that, hey, this isn't just about the generator. This is about belonging, and it's about learning from one another. And it's even more personal now with my son, um, to see students as they get older. My son's 7. He's adorable. He's the cutest kid at the whole school. And people think he's pretty cute. But, wait until he's a 14-year-old, awkward, making weird noises in the classroom or biting his hand or needing to get up and jump against a wall.
Hmm.
Will he be accepted? Will he have that space where he feels safe and not just, that's my big thing lately is like, are we really just putting up with certain students, or are we valuing them? Do we value their difference, not just putting up with it? And I really hope that someday he can continue to have that feeling of love and acceptance in the classroom. And I think this is just one tool that kind of allows us to break up those social groups. Um, yeah,
That's good. Do you enjoy social media?
I'm burnt out. I'll be honest. Like, I did a
Hmm.
year of that, and I I took a break after the school year was up, and I've been having a really hard time getting back into it. I I had a really good post that I needed to make today, and I just did something else instead. I was like, I'm
Yeah,
just so tired. I'm
yeah.
so tired of it. But what I'm focusing on right now is the grouping generator is there. It's free, and it's really just the generator. There's no story or about me or any of that. And I think instead of focusing on doing a lot new posts, I'm focusing on building more of the story on the website of why is this important and why does it matter and who am I, and how to reach out to me.
Yeah, I think that if you're gonna build the story, building the story on social media is where you want to build that story versus building the story on the website. Because I don't know how many people actually read stuff on the
Sure,
website. I don't ever really go on a website to read something, right? I'm gonna go on
yeah,
somebody's page and I'm gonna hear the story.
sure,
Um, and so I think that that's the way to go if you're gonna tell that story. And I think that the post that you make, need to relate to the story because that's what got me. When you're telling me the story, I'm like, oh, that's it right there. And I think
yeah,
that making posts about the story is something that will come natural to you because
hmm,
you're not really forced. This is the story. This is natural. Like I can just tell the
yeah,
story all the time. Um, and that's the struggle that I've had where it social media is an interesting place. And I feel like I just want to do things that I want to do. Like I want to
yeah,
post ideas that I feel passionate about. And the minute I start to like force an idea, the the minute I start to like, I don't know,
Yeah.
like cater to a certain audience or like make a video, oh, I think that this will really work because I think that the my audience will like this one, but
Yeah.
maybe I don't necessarily like it, but I know that I'll get likes if I say something. Like if I were to do that kind of stuff, that's where I lose interest in all of
Sure.
this. In all of this, I lose interest, and I just want to make posts that I feel comfortable making, and some of the stuff do well, some of it doesn't, and I am okay with that,
Hmm.
and I'm okay with it because I chose to put that out, and it worked for me. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I wanted to put out. But
Well, and
social
I,
media,
I told you that that post that you posted today, just talking about students and the what we started off talking
yeah,
about. To me,
yeah.
that was the most impactful, and I could definitely tell that it came from the heart and that it was kind of fresh on your mind, which felt really nice.
Yeah. Well, we're coming toward the end of the podcast right here. And at the end of the podcast, Rob, I always ask my guests, what are a couple of tips that you could give to any future educators that might be thinking
Hmm.
about either, joining this field of education, being a teacher, or just maybe working overseas, maybe doing something
Yeah.
like you did? What kind of tips would
Yeah.
you give them?
My niece Lily just got her first teaching job, and I'm so proud of her. She's a ninth grade math teacher, and she's so young. Like she's literally, I think she's 21 years old, and
Wow.
she's now like, she looks
Wow.
like a high school student. Sorry, Lily, but I think she said she admitted that. But I've been trying to just kind of listen to her and check in with her often. So it's been kind of on my mind of like, yeah, geez, I didn't start teaching until I was 27. And even then I was just
Hmm.
so not ready.
Mhm, mhm,
So
mhm.
it blows my mind. I would say I always just start by saying there's so many amazing life changing books out there, uh, and to find some teachers that you really respect, go to coffee with them, and then ask them what books really kind of changed their understanding of teaching. I made a list on Goodreads that are books about that made me a better teacher that aren't necessarily about the classroom, but are
Yes.
just so like Brene Brown's Daring Greatly or Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy. Those are two books that shaped me as a person, but like really made me a better teacher. Never mentioned the classroom. But so I think one is just find those people who you really respect and look up to, get a coffee, get some good book recommendations, and just get some
Yeah.
perspectives in. I would say the second is just absorb as much as you possibly can. I think instead of thinking that you have all the answers, go into every situation just ready to learn more than the teaching. And then um, just trying new things, not being afraid of failing. We do that a lot with entrepreneurship. Is this idea? I talked to them about that today, actually. When I first started writing motorcycles, someone said it's not a matter of if you crash, it's a matter of when. And
Yeah.
having that plan for I will crash. And when I do, what am I going to do in response to that? And I think we walk into the classroom every day just with the understanding I'm going to crash.
Right.
There's going to be failures, and that's okay. And like, what do we need to do in response to that is the most important thing. So,
Absolutely. Well, Rob, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on the podcast, and thank you for
John, thank
spending
you so
time.
much for having. This was my very first podcast I ever got to be on, and I have been so excited, especially just getting to reach out to you and getting to meet you. And thank you so
Well,
much for your perspective, and I look forward to staying in touch with you.